Youth embracing their future, a vision we can all support, bringing practical skills to adults and youth so that we can all live life with courage, confidence, and connections. Welcome back to Discover You, the podcast. Today, we're talking about communication, what that is, why it's important, how do we teach it and model it, what barriers we encounter with it. And I have Sarah here with me again, and we're just going to let her take it away. So, Sarah, what is communication?
Well, it's really an interesting topic when we think about the broad nature of communication. There's nothing that we can do in this world without being able to communicate with one another. It's incredibly crucial. So if we think about communication, it's really just an exchange of ideas. It's communicating our emotions, facts, information with one another.
It's true. And it's like we were talking about before, it's a very important part of life for literally everything you need.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah. Well, you use communication to create understanding. Again, to exchange those ideas and thoughts, to problem solve, to collaborate. There's nothing that we can do in work or life or business or relationships without being able to communicate with one another.
And it's so important. Yeah. And I just, this is a good one for me because I think like for a long time, I really struggled with communicating. And now I'm feeling like I'm getting to the point where I'm able to communicate a lot better. And it's like I can see that it's positively affecting my relationships and stuff. And so this is a good one for me. I'm excited to talk about communication.
I'm glad because there's a part of me that's now curious. Like there's going to be a moment where I want to ask you to be like, so what are those things you've done to improve your communication? You can think about that and decide if you want to share that with our audience or not.
So while we're talking about why it's important, why do you think it's important? Besides, obviously, we need it to form and build and nurture our relationships.
Yeah. So I feel like those are like the obvious things. If you Google it or, you get one of the millions of books that are probably written about communication, right in our tagline, we talk about connections. And in order for me to feel connected with you, I'm going to have to share a part of myself. I'm going to have to be able to relate to you. I'm going to have to hear your perspective and listen and understand. And communication is really key. In our next episode, we're going to talk about relationships. You just fundamentally can't be in a relationship unless you're able to communicate. And even if we think about, we're going to talk later in this episode about barriers to communication, but if we think about how we as society have strove to overcome problems with communication, whether that's with technology. I'm thinking about American Sign Language, for example, when there's a physical barrier to being able to communicate the way the large portion of the population does. We're still intelligently coming up with ways to convey information, to connect with one another. And relationships are so crucial. We'll talk about that next time. But within that, an ability to communicate is really crucial and key. And as we think back to our previous episodes around social and emotional learning, being really self-aware and socially aware so that then we can have those relationships, so then we make good decisions, right? It's just a key. It's just a piece and a part of all of the way in which the world works, the way we work together, the way we function. I mean, you texted me this morning to be like, "Hey, are we still doing this?" like you communicated with me. We have to be able to communicate.
I think this it's like almost 2 years now that we've been dealing with all of the COVID stuff. I feel like we really, as a society, shifted our communicating skills to be better. I would say, I personally think that they got better within these last couple years. I mean, all the kids had to go online for schools. How is that going to work? How are we going to teach hundreds of thousands of kids to do school online without, in areas that, don't have internet or poor internet. And then, we saw people like Comcast or whoever, putting out like, here's free Wi-Fi. And I think doing stuff like that, and Zoom is now a daily part of our lives, like and we're putting out things like podcasts so we can talk to people, and YouTube videos, and I feel like we shifted our communication to be more social media based. And I feel like that's a good thing. I don't know if that
Are you sure?
I feel like social media had a bad name for itself. Because it was just like a place to go and like gossip or like talk bad about people or stuff like that. But now I feel like people are connecting because of social media. Like just this weekend, I drove to Wisconsin. It was an 8-hour drive to the town that I went to in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, so that I can meet one of my friends who I met online for the first time in person. Like, we've been friends for almost 2 years, and we got to meet, but we wouldn't have ever been friends had we not started communicating online. And I just I think it's so cool. I don't know. That was probably like a little tangent, but I think that's really cool.
Well, no, I'm listening to you, and I'm always kind of sorting things out in my head. And I think there's, you're talking about like means of communication, like how we've improved our ability to reach people. And then there's that part of that bad reputation of social media of, well, how are we really conveying our ideas? How are we relating and connecting with people? And we do that also through communication. So I feel like there's the means, but there's also maybe a presence or a style or intent, or I don't know. So I think there's two factors, because you're right. Like, and communication and how we've been able to expand our reach has really allowed us to be more diverse, more inclusive, broadens our horizons. Like, probably you wouldn't have decided to go drive to Wisconsin on a whim unless you had someone to meet there. Like, you just never been like, let's go find some cheese.
Yeah, like, let's go to the middle of Wisconsin. There's literally not even cell service there. Like, it was terrible. But like it then, like, it was a great trip and everything, but it was nice to be able to put like a whole person to the person that I have only known the face of. And I mean, like, we've seen that when we were coming back to the office. Like, our first in-person meeting is like, oh, this is what I look like. This is me. So it's
no, I've had multiple meetings where I had initially met the individual virtually, and when they walk into the coffee shop, I'm like, I think that's them, but I'm not really sure. And you saw that when we were starting back to in person, where people were so like almost overjoyed. And so it goes back to that need for connection again, that we want to be in relation with one another. We want to be able to connect, and we do that through communication. And virtual is great, and it's expanded our horizons. Yet there's certainly a value of 3-dimensional. And being in person,
being face to face, and like physically face to face. And it's not easy to read like nonverbal communication, body language. It's not easy to read that stuff when you're virtual all the time. Because just because I'm sitting like this and I'm smiling at you doesn't mean you can't see me like fidgeting because I'm nervous or I'm uncomfortable under the table. And so I think that's just more parts of communication.
Absolutely.
The nonverbals.
Yeah, nonverbal is a huge form of communication.
Definitely. So for our youth, why should we like teach communication to them? Why should we be good models of that? And how, like, what's the best way to go about it?
I feel like our answer all the time for adults is about modeling to our kids. So like, I'll just like say that and then put that over here, because I don't want that always to be the default. So I think about, what are the best ways to be teaching good communication skills to our youth? Like, first, I have to have them, and I do need to model them. Back over there. And then start to talk to them and teach them, like, what is good communication? Like, one of the activities that we do in our curriculum within middle school, high school is talk to them about Well, do you text your teacher? Do you text for a job interview? Or do you email? Or do you make a phone call? And going back to your example of technology, the normal forms of communication that maybe I used and you use and maybe a teenager use could be 3 different ways of comfortably, regularly communicating. So being able to recognize how you're presenting yourself based on the means, the medium of communication that you're utilizing. And then the words that we choose. Our message is composed of so many things. You brought up nonverbal communication. So my nonverbal, my hand gestures, my facial expressions, my body posture, I'm saying something with all of my nonverbal behavior. But then there's my words, right? So what words am I choosing? What's my tone of voice? And all of that is building some sort of message that I want to be conveying to someone. And at the end of the day, I just want to be understood. And so I would anticipate others want to be understood too. And so if I'm going to do my very best to be understood, I'm trying to think how to piece this together. Like I have to then also take into consideration how people are understanding me. And I totally just went on a tangent. You asked about how we teach this to youth, but these are the things we have to teach them.
Yeah.
Like these are the things like my son, we actually, you all are going to hear about my son a lot because he's my example of the world. And I think I mentioned on a previous episode about his very neutral face. And so he's hard to read. And wanting to help him understand, if you want to be understood, you might have to think about how are you expressing yourself with your face? Are you smiling? Are you grimacing? What are you conveying?
Right.
Because right now you're not really conveying a whole lot unless people know you well, because he's really hard to read. So just even having those conversations. So just teaching about the aspects of communication, having the conversations with young people. How do we communicate? What message are we sending? There's so much. I mean, we have whole classes on communication.
Yeah. No, I took a class while I was in college. And it actually wasn't a communications class. It was like a class about like development and like in adolescence and such. But we talked about communicating and what it means to listen and how to properly listen and what that looks like. And, it's paying attention. The nonverbal communications, like you're nodding your head, you're smiling because you're listening to them. It's repeating stuff back like, oh, so you said that this happened? And, and like those are such important things. And that's like, I think the first way to start teaching it. Like, if you want to be listened to, you need to listen also. Because you won't be able to have a good conversation, like a good communicating experience if you're not listening. Because it's like you could start talking about whatever and then I'm like, what did you say? Right. So that's important.
Well, and we will definitely talk about listening as a deeper topic in a future episode because there's so much that goes into it and how people feel valued if you're really listening to them.
Yes.
And then their willingness to share more or feel heard or understood. Or even, like you were saying, kind of the paraphrasing back, like if we're trying to solve a problem, like we already know you have a face you give me when you've already solved the problem that I'm sorting out loud, half in my mind, half coming out of my mouth. Yes. It's really a cute face. I just want you all to know she's kind of got this like little smirky face and she's already solved the problem like probably 5 days ago. And she's just waiting patiently for me to come to the same understanding. Okay. But if I'm trying to sort that through, like you listening, me sharing an idea, you helping me understand knowledge and information I don't have, that's going to help us solve that problem together. And eventually I will come to the understanding you had already reached. Or depending what it is, we'll come to an understanding together. And I will have learned something. It's why communication is so important.
Just this past weekend with my fiance, we don't like get into arguments or anything like that. We get into like just like disagreements is what we call them. But we were, like visiting some family and stuff and some like things were happening. And I was like in my emotions. And I went to him to talk to him, to tell him how I was feeling and to communicate what I was going through. because like I said earlier, I've been getting better at communicating. And I was like not shut down necessarily, but the feeling of being heard wasn't there because he wasn't like wasn't listening to me. Well, he was listening, but he was distracted. He was paying attention to other things. And so like that, like it hurts. And so then later on in the night, when we were talking again, and he was upset that I had gone to one of my friends, and I was like, this is how I'm feeling, and I'm like texting them, and I'm like, this is how I'm feeling, and stuff like that. And he's like, but why are you texting them? I'm your fiance. You should talk to me. And I just looked at him and I said, I tried talking to you and you showed no interest in what I was saying. And so why would I want to keep talking to you? And so then we talked more and came to understandings and, heard each other. But like, it's important that the feeling of being listened to is like crucial if you want to have good communication. Because if you're not like, I don't want to talk to somebody who doesn't want to listen to me or like, and so yeah, it's important. Listen.
Well, and think about that then as it relates to our young people. One of the things that I think is incredibly important to talk about around communication is an equitable, I don't say like power struggle, but like an equitable way of being in communication with one another. And very often, I'm the adult, you're the child, I'm the parent, you're the kid, I'm the teacher, you're the student, right? And so we have, I guess, divisions when it comes to authority and perception of power. And just like you were talking about, like when I share something important to me, something emotional to me, I don't want to feel like I'm in this power differential. I want to feel like, yes, that we're equal and we're heard. That's how, young people, just let's pause for a moment and use our empathy, which is another skill of communication, and just recognize the multiple positions that they are in, being told what to do all of the time. And I vividly remember a conflict that was happening in our household. Our son was conveying what I thought was attitude. I, of course, like powered up and parented over him. And he goes off into his room, slams the door. I take a deep breath. He comes out later and he says, "Can I just tell you what's really bothering me?" Proud parenting, right? And I was like, it wasn't about you slamming the basketball into the couch, which is why you got sent to your room. It's really about this other thing that's going on. So the ability, I think one of the things about communication that's so important is our ability to convey those emotions in a way where we feel like we're heard and we're valued, and that we can do it in an equal way, and that young people feel like they have autonomy, that they have some sort of agency in what's happening. We talk a lot about that right now. Young people being able to have voice into what's happening in their worlds and their environments, especially with going back to school or not going back to school. We had that conversation in our household. We have a teen, so I think sometimes it's a little easier to have that agency for him. But to decide, what do you want to do? Do you want to go back full person? Do you want to stay virtual? And his comment was, I want to be around my friends, right? Like, it's okay. Like, I'm going to honor that. So just being able to create an equitable environment of communication where we value what everyone has to say, regardless of, I know more because I've been here X amount of years more than you have, but clearly I don't know more of all of the things that you do. And so we have something to learn from one another. And I've tangented again, but like, that is my biggest hope for the world, is that we all learn to communicate better so that we can move forward together.
That's the thing I like the most about our after school program is that, yes, we're there to supervise and to be the adult in the room and to say, no, maybe stop throwing the basketball across the cafeteria. But we're also there to be equals with them, to be equals with the kids and just talk to them and not treat them like we're better than them, that they have to do what I say because I'm an adult. They like to think that I'm a lot younger than I am. And so they're like, what do you even know about life? And I'm like, oh, honey, let me tell you, I'm not as young as you think I am. And it's nice to have that relationship with them, because then they also feel like they can come to you. And like I was talking to one of our students last week, and they were telling me, oh yeah, Cheyenne, the team leader at one of our sites, I think she knows more about me than my mom does. And it was just like, that's good for Cheyenne. Like she made that relationship, and she, made that child feel heard and respected and listened to, and they felt that they could open up and continue to share with them. And I was just like, oh, you go. So,
well, and when we're investing that time to communicate effectively with anyone, but particularly youth, then we're creating that opportunity for them to learn and grow, for them to be good communicators, for them to be successful in life. Like we're just creating that opportunity.
Do you want to bring the model it back over now? And what's the best way to model it for our youth?
For me, it has been working on my communication style and modeling good communication even in our household. We try really hard not to have arguments. When I was growing up, my parents fought all the time, and it just was not a positive environment for me growing up. And I've probably swung a little hard the other way, and I try hard not to have arguments in front of our children and grandchildren. Yet I think there's an opportunity to model how do you have healthy discord when you don't agree with someone or someone has done something to hurt you or upset you. And so we model that in our household when there's a struggle, when there's an issue, open communication, honesty. Like, man, when I've screwed up as a parent and I have to go back and be like, you know what, this was a mistake I made. This is why I made it. I shouldn't have done it. And here's how I'd like to rectify it. Man, that is incredibly powerful, like insanely powerful. So really just, we're going to go back to that self-awareness and that self-management from the social and emotional learning components of how am I learning and growing? And then vulnerably being honest and authentic in my communication.
I think what you're saying about the power, the impact of being an adult and being wrong, and then going back to whoever you were talking to. It doesn't have to just be a youth. It could be literally anybody, a coworker, your sister, your mom, anybody. Just going back and saying, I was wrong. You were right. Like, I'm sorry that I was wrong. I thought that I was right. But like, just like having that, like, I can't think of the word, but like, knowing, like, just like going back and doing that speaks volumes. Like, there's multiple times, like, growing up, like my sister is very hot-headed. And so she would get into like arguments with my stepdad and stuff all the time. But even when they're both wrong, they just wouldn't do anything. They would sit on opposite sides of the house from each other. They wouldn't speak to each other for a couple days, and then everything would be fine. It would just go back to normal. And it creates such a like tense environment. And it's not good. I mean, like, I'm the oldest, but like even still, like, I felt uncomfortable in that situation, and I wasn't even a part of it. It's not so being able to say, yeah, no, what I did wasn't right and you were right actually, and I don't know what I'm talking about, is like, it's like chef's kisses. It's like the best thing you can do. It's like the icing on the cake, the cherry on the sundae. It's just it's a very important part of the communicating, I would say.
I'm feeling good as a parent right now, right? Like, and it's hard, man, when there's been those moments where like, I know I've blown it. It's like, wow, but I want to be able to demonstrate that. And I want that to happen in that relationship too, which we'll talk about next time. One of the other things, you already know, I'm a big processor, and sometimes I'm processing out loud a lot. I have intentionally done that as a technique to help my children understand my thought process as I'm trying to resolve problems and
Mm.
issues. So even being able to be like, wow, I'm really angry about that. Why am I angry about that? Oh, I'm angry because of this. Well, I should probably go talk to that person. Well, I wonder why they're upset. Like, I will do all of that thought process somewhat out loud
Mm.
so that then it's demonstrating how to come to an understanding of how I'm going to talk about the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be, I could be processing things about work, where I'm like, wow, I have this really cool idea. I got to figure out how to convey it in a way that others will understand it, because sometimes there's too many words in my head and I have to
Mm-hmm.
simplify things when they come out of my mouth. And so I'll intentionally walk that through, or I'll even practice that on my family members and be like, here's, I think, what I want to talk about in tomorrow's staff meeting. Does this make sense to you if I say it this way? So, I'm working on it. Okay?
Yeah.
Like, I truly am. Because it's important for me to be understood. And so I want to demonstrate to, again, the young people or just anyone in my life, the work I'm doing here to make sure my message is being heard and understood.
Yeah, I think, it's all such good info. It's just so good. Just communicating, man. It's not easy, but we definitely make it harder than it should be.
Say more about that. What do you think we do that makes it harder?
I feel like we are, what's the thing? We're our own worst enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I'll use myself as an example because I was notorious for doing this. I'm still a little bad at it, but I am getting better. Something happens, literally whatever, and you don't talk about it. You hold it in. A couple days go by, something happens. You don't talk about it. You hold it in. Cup's getting more and more full. Yeah. Now you're overflowing. You got a puddle of water on the table. The room is flooded.
Yep.
And then the smallest thing happens, and it's a drop of water into that cup, and now you have exploded, and you're just like, and this happened, and this happened, and you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and that's not how you should communicate. It shouldn't be, here's everything you did in the last 5 months that made me upset. Yeah. It should be before dinner, you did this, and now it's after dinner, and this is how I feel. Like, I've had time to think about it, but, like, I don't know. I feel like we need to not let things build up. And I totally understand, like, letting things fester for a minute. Letting things, taking a day to think about something, maybe something really big happened. Taking a couple days. But to let something go for so long. I had a friend in high school who, she was my best friend, absolute best friend. From the minute I came into my new school district, her and I became friends, and we were friends. That was it. Like, we were best friends. And during our senior year, we saved up all of our money. We went on a cruise together for our senior trip with her family and stuff. And I remember she wanted to stay in our below deck, like, bottom of the boat room to work on homework and stuff, because it was like February. But I wanted to go out and, like, hang out with people on the boat. There was, like, a kids, like, teen youth area, and I was like, I want to go there and hang out with people. I ended up going there, making a bunch of friends that I still talk to this day. But she didn't like that I did that, but she never told me. And so then when we got back from our trip, she didn't talk to me for like a week, which was weird because we talked every single day. Yeah. 8 to 9 to 10 hours a day. Like, we would talk. And we just kind of, like, she just, like, that was it. She just stopped talking to me. And then, like, she was telling all these other people what was happening. And so one by one, my friend group was just, like, dwindling to nobody. And then here it was, prom season, and we already had our table picked out. We already bought the tickets. Once you make and set your table, you can't change it. That's how it was at my school. and it was like sitting at a table full of strangers because none of them wanted to talk to me, and I had literally no idea what I did wrong.
Yep.
And I just was like, I literally don't know. And so my mom stepped in and was like, "What's the problem?" And so she told my mom, who then came and told me, because she like couldn't talk to me. And then my mom made us like all sit down and have like a cry fest. So we kind of worked it out to get through the last 2 weeks of school. But then after that, it was like immediately same thing happened again. She no longer spoke to me. And it wasn't until last summer in like September, October, she messaged me on Facebook. We weren't even friends. She had unfriended me on everything. She sent me a message on Facebook, and it was like extremely long. And she started with, "I know I should have done this sooner. We should have talked about things sooner." And I remember like reading it and just crying because I literally had no idea what I did. And then when she was like walking me through what was happening in that message, she was even saying herself, it really wasn't that big of a deal. It really, like, it was something so small. I just wanted to hang out with you. But like, how was I supposed to know that if that's all you wanted when you got that upset at me and then didn't speak to me out of high school for 7, 8 years? We didn't speak for 8 years. That's a long time to not talk to somebody and wonder why for so long. And so after that whole situation happened is when I kind of like shifted my like thoughts on communicating. Like, okay, I need to not let things fester for that long. And I need to, like, if something is wrong, I need to speak on it. I need to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is why, or this is how you made me feel, and this is why I feel this way. So, you know,
Well,
that's the reason. That's why I decided, just I woke up and I was like, you know what? Life's too short to not talk about your feelings. We're all human. We all have feelings. We need to just talk about them. So,
well, and it takes a commitment, right? And so I just really want to like applaud you on saying, you know what, this isn't. I don't want to do it this way, right? Too much was lost, because it does take a commitment on our end to be like, nope, I'm having this conflict. And we'll talk about nonviolent communication and conflict management in a future episode, but like, I know what I want to say. I've thought this through. I like blah, 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 and I'm ready to go have this conversation. We have to be willing to be brave and be courageous and do that if we're going to solve problems, live life together. So again, that's one of the key things about communication is it's not just problem solving, like how are we going to record our podcast today? It's problem solving, like, wow, we have a problem and I don't want it to last for 8 or 9 years. And so being able to walk that through and share the thoughts, the emotions, the situation with one another in a way where we can come to some sort of understanding.
I'm really bad at, I'm not a yeller. I don't yell because I just can't. Like, I will cry. If like I like start to get upset and I'm like teary eyed, and that's how my like fiance knows that I'm like, what I'm saying is important, because if it wasn't important, I wouldn't cry about it, you know? But I'm like there's this is so silly. There was one time at the job that I used to have in college at a Subway. I got to work and I put this one CD in the music player because I was like, you know what? I want to listen to this CD today. I'm the team leader. This is what I want to do. We're going to listen to this. Nobody from the other shift is here yet, so they'll just come in and it'll be this. And then, you know, the team starts rolling in and stuff. And about halfway through the night, one of the team members went back to the CD player, took the CD out, and put a different CD in. And I was so mad. I was like, she took the CD out that I put in. She's out to get me, obviously. And so I was upset and like angry about it. And so I was just sitting there and I was washing the dishes really aggressively. And she came over and was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I couldn't make eye contact because I was like, if I look at you, I will start crying right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I really wanted to listen to that CD. It's something so silly as a CD. But she was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that you would put that CD in. I thought that was just the one that was playing from the last shift. I'll go put it back in." And like it was like totally fine.
Yeah.
And then we like we talked and hugged it out, and I was like, that was the silliest thing to get upset about, and I'm sorry. I don't know why I felt that way. I don't know why this CD was so important to me.
Yeah.
But it's like those it's just like those little things. Like imagine if I would have let that fester for the rest of the school year. I would have hated working with her. I would have like come to work and just been like, oh God, this person's working. I can't believe it. I don't like somebody trade shifts with me. I don't want to work with this person.
I have like 5 more episodes listed out in our programming plan based on this conversation.
Because dig into Sam's past. A spin-off series.
There's so much to it, right? Like, are your needs being met? What's important to you? Like, what the emotion is attached to? Is there a thinking trap? Was she really out to get you? Probably not. Like
the ABC model.
Absolutely. So like we have so many things that go to there's always something behind what's happening and how do we want to convey our message so that we're able to be understood is really the key of it. I mean, we could talk about communication styles. We could talk about the barriers to communication. I mean, there's so much that goes into communication, which I think is just exempling why it's really important.
It's so important. And for like like I guess like personal reasons, like like reasons for us as to like, oh, this is why it was important to me. This is why it was important to you. I think it's just important in general to like teach, model, and show our youth how to like communicate in a healthy like manner that's not going to like bite them in the butt in the long run. Because that's how they're gonna that's how they're going to live. Growing up, my fiance sees this right now too. Our families didn't talk about our feelings, and so we really struggled to talk about our feelings, and that's why we let stuff bottle up until it's 2:00 in the morning, and we like literally physically can't sleep because we're so like bottled up, and then we just start talking, and the next thing you know, it's 5:30. We both have to get up for work in like an hour and a half, and we're exhausted. Like it's draining. It's draining, and so like it's important to teach them. This is how you properly communicate. It's okay to talk about your feelings. People should listen to you when you're talking about your feelings, and if they're not, then that's not on you. And it's so important. It's so important.
Absolutely. Well, even things like being able to, ask for what you need. Again, resolve problems, communicate an idea. It's endless. All the way from conflict management to problem solving to idea sharing, collaboration. The world works on communication. The world works on communication. We all need to get better at it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so while we kind of come to the end of this like little segment, which has just kind of felt like a long tangent about communicating.
It's all right. It's all right.
You mentioned before some barriers that we see. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more before we wrap up?
Yeah, sure. I think we've mentioned them as we go along, have gone along. Being able to convey our message effectively, the words that we're choosing, our nonverbal communication, how we're even perceiving nonverbal, or others are perceiving our communication style. Am I real direct in my communication? Am I always telling you, or am I asking and involving you in problems or solutions or that kind of thing? So there's a time to be directive and there's a time to be collaborative. So being able on my end to have that social awareness and use that to know how to communicate effectively. So some of it's just style, some of it's timing. You talk about addressing issues when they're happening versus 8 years later. Timing can be a barrier. Maybe it's not the right time and the right moment because of who's in the room to address an issue. So considering that timing, maybe I'm so emotional that you're like, I am so not going to go talk to her about this right now because it's just not going to go well. So again, timing can be an issue. Nonverbal and perception of nonverbal, if face you're making says something to me and that's really not what you meant to say, is really, really key. Emotions can be a barrier. Like I'm, whatever's going on with me, you may have no idea, and you might just be that last drop in that flooded room, and you had nothing to do with flooding the room, and my room's just really flooded, and you just happen to drop something in there, and you're like, okay, like, not sure what happened there. Needs and values, I think, we're seeing this, and we try to stay completely focused on, youth and how am I impacting youth as an adult. But when we look at our society right now, man alive, needs and values and opinions are on fire. And our ability to communicate effectively, to be understood, is a barrier. Which is really kind of like, it's almost kind of sad. It's a loop, right? Because if we need to communicate so that our needs and our values are understood and our needs are met, but if we can't tailor our communication style and our ability to connect and understand, our needs aren't going to get met and our values aren't going to be honored. And that just,
the vicious cycle.
We're just spinning that wheel. So yeah, technology is a huge barrier to communication, and we've tried to overcome that. When you can't convey emotion in a text, we have emojis, right? That's why they exist.
Literally emotion con.
Yes. Because words are a very small percentage of our communication and what our message. And if I'm just typing out words quickly, you might read that and be startled by like my abruptness, but if I put a little smiley face next to it, you're like, oh, okay. So technology can be helpful, but it can also be a barrier.
I like technology as both being helpful and a barrier, because I think of things like Starbucks. I don't know if the Starbucks up here has it, but the Starbucks in my hometown, because I'm from like a relatively large city, they have the big screens that, if let's say you come through and you use sign language to talk, that you can say, I don't know, like there's like a button or something you push and then the screen opens and then now it's a camera, and the person taking orders can see you and you can see them, and you can either like write your order on a piece of paper and show it, or you can do sign and they can say, okay, this is what you want. Like, that's awesome. That's all. Like, you can't do that. You wouldn't be able to order at the little speaker. You'd have to go all the way up to the window, say on a piece of paper, I want a double cheeseburger and fry. I like my phone, for instance. If we're in a room of people and you say something that upsets me, I'm the type of person that's going to try extremely hard to not let everybody know what just happened. But I will text you and say, hey, what you did made me feel this way. We should talk about this later. And like, that's helpful. That could be hurtful too, because then, you're like wanting to have the argument through text, and that's not how you should communicate. You should not have arguments through text message. But it's like, that's like awesome, Yeah. So
you talk about the things that we should teach our young people, right? And not having an argument through text is probably like one of those just like fundamental things that we just probably shouldn't do. You just shouldn't do. So when we're guiding and mentoring and teaching young people effective communication, I think it's some of those tidbits like, and then this is why you shouldn't have an argument through text, because this is what's lost, or this is what happened to me when I did do that. So I wouldn't want that to happen to you. So really being able to help them understand, we don't do all caps in an email because you're essentially like yelling at someone. And if the email's gone back and forth 3 or more times, you might as well just pick up the phone and have the conversation and resolve that faster.
Yeah.
So just really giving out examples and being able to come home from a work environment and share, like, wow, I really struggled to convey this idea to my coworkers. And so instead I did this, and just continue to demonstrate what we're doing to learn,
right,
and do better.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know, just do better. Again, I feel like every episode is like, well, it's just my personal responsibility to be a better communicator. And it is.
Yes. It's important for you to do these things, because we can be good communicators, but it doesn't mean that you are going to be a good communicator, because believe it or not, we don't live your life for you. So I think those are very important topics, tidbits that we touched on today.
Yeah, and we'll probably do more, because it's a big topic.
It's very big. I feel like we could talk about this forever.
Yeah.
So, well, how about, for all of you listening, will you please, with a cherry on top, tell us something that you took from this today? Like, what idea about communicating, or how not to communicate, did you take from this? And tell us what that idea was, and how you would like to try to model that in your own life. Be it, I'm going to try not to text argue anymore, or I'm going to try to not let my room flood, and whatever it may be. Tell us what that is in the comments on Facebook or Instagram. You can tweet at us. You can put it on YouTube. And remember that you can listen to the podcast wherever you listen to the podcast. You're listening to it right now, or you're watching it on YouTube. All of our social media handles are Discover You programs, except for Twitter. That one's Discover You prog. There's a character limit.
There's a limit to our communication in Twitter.
You can only have so many letters in your username. So, but you can find us on all of those and share with us. Just tell us what you took from this and how you want to implement it in your life. So,
yeah, you see, Sam and I have a lot of two-way communication. We're only having one-way communication with you, so we'd like to start hearing from you.
Yes.
So if you can start communicating with us, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, we would love the communication. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks for watching, if you're watching. Can't wait to communicate with you, and we will see you next time.